She fed the freezing stranger with her last meal. The next morning his convoy filled the whole street. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now let's begin. It was a cold and stormy night in the heart of a small town in upstate New York. The wind howled, rattling the windows of the old diner where Anna worked tirelessly to serve the last few customers of the night. The clock on the wall ticked slowly towards midnight, and the diner's warm lights offered a comforting refuge from the fierce snowstorm outside. Anna had been on her feet for hours, her body aching from the long shift. She wiped down the counter, her movements automatic, her thoughts wandering to her mother, who had been sick for weeks, and to her little brother, who was waiting at home for her to come back. The diner was almost empty, save for one lone figure sitting in a booth near the back, his figure hunched over, cloaked in a dark coat that had clearly seen better days. His face was pale, almost ghostly, his eyes staring into his cup of coffee as though lost in thought. Anna couldn't help but notice him as she made her rounds. He looked out of place in the quiet diner, his expensive clothes contrasting with the rustic setting. He hadn't ordered anything, but she could see the slight tremor in his hands as he clutched the cup and the weariness etched on his face. It was the kind of exhaustion that went beyond just physical fatigue. Anna walked over to him, offering a polite smile, her tone soft as she spoke. "Can I get you something, sir? Maybe something warm to eat?" The man looked up at her, his eyes cloudy with confusion at first, then a flicker of recognition seemed to pass over his face. "I'm not sure I have enough," he muttered, his voice low and rough. "Just a little soup, I suppose." Anna studied him for a moment, the instinct to help rising in her. Without thinking, she nodded and said, "Don't worry about it, sir. I'll bring you something warm." She quickly hurried to the kitchen, her heart heavy with the burden of her own struggles. She didn't have much left for herself, but she couldn't bear the thought of someone being cold and hungry on a night like this. She grabbed the last of the soup, heating it up, and then brought it to the man's table, setting it down in front of him with a gentle smile. "Here you go. Please, take your time." The man looked at the steaming bowl, then up at her, his eyes softening in gratitude. "Thank you," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Anna nodded, turning to leave, but she paused when she heard him speak again. "You're too kind," he added, his voice a mix of surprise and sincerity. Anna didn't know why, but something about his tone made her pause. She turned back, offering a small smile. "It's nothing. Just take care of yourself. It's a harsh night out there." The man nodded, and she walked back to the counter, continuing to wipe down surfaces. The storm outside intensified as the hours passed. The diner grew quieter, with the last few customers finishing their meals and heading out into the cold. As Anna was about to lock the door for the night, the man stood up, his face now more composed. He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a few bills, offering them to her. "This is all I have," he said, his tone almost apologetic. "Please, let me pay you for the meal." Anna hesitated, shaking her head. "It's on the house. Please, just stay warm." The man seemed to consider her words for a moment before nodding, as if he had made up his mind. "Thank you," he said again, his voice sincere. "You have no idea how much this means to me." With that, he turned and walked out into the storm, leaving Anna to wonder about the man who had appeared so suddenly and disappeared just as quickly. What she didn't know was that this simple act of kindness would set off a chain of events that would change her life forever. The next morning, as Anna arrived at the diner for her shift, she was stunned by the sight that greeted her. The street outside was filled with dozens of luxury cars, their polished exteriors gleaming in the early morning sunlight. At least 135 cars were parked in front of the diner, each more expensive than the last. Anna stood in disbelief as a man in a tailored suit approached her, his expression serious but polite. "Miss Anna?" he asked. She nodded, still trying to process what was happening. "I'm from Mr. Donovan's office," the man continued. "He's here to speak with you." Anna's heart raced as the man led her out to the street. As she stepped outside, she was greeted by the sight of the man from the night before, now standing tall and confident, surrounded by a group of well-dressed individuals. "Good morning," he said, his voice warm but businesslike. I'm Mr. Donovan, and I wanted to thank you for your kindness last night. It's not often someone shows such generosity, especially to a stranger. Anna stood frozen, unsure of what to say. Mr. Donovan smiled slightly, clearly noticing her confusion. I believe I owe you more than just thanks, he said. You see, I am the CEO of a large investment firm, and after a bit of research, I've decided to offer you a life-changing opportunity. I would like to help you expand your diner and support your family in a way that no one else could. Anna blinked, her mind struggling to grasp the magnitude of what he was saying. What had she done to deserve this? And yet, here he was, offering her a chance at a future she had never imagined. As he spoke, the storm outside seemed to fade away, leaving only the promise of something new and unimaginable. I woke up the next morning with the sun barely peeking through the thick snow clouds. The wind outside had calmed, but the storm from the night before had left its mark. The streets were covered in a thick layer of snow, and the whole town seemed to be holding its breath, as if waiting for something extraordinary to happen. As Anna walked into the diner, she couldn't help but notice the odd quietness of the place. It felt different today, even though it was still early. She flipped the open sign and began her usual routine of cleaning the counters and prepping for the day. The warmth of the kitchen was a welcome contrast to the cold outside, but there was an unease in the air. It was like the calm before a storm. As she was arranging the napkins and silverware, she heard the sound of a car pulling up outside. It was odd for anyone to be driving so early, let alone in the middle of winter after a snowstorm like the one that had ravaged the area. She brushed it off, thinking it was just another delivery or a regular customer arriving early. But then she noticed something that made her stop in her tracks. A convoy of cars was slowly making its way down the street. Luxury cars. At least 35, maybe more. The gleaming exteriors shone brightly in the morning light, like a parade of wealth and power. Anna squinted through the diner's front window, trying to make sense of what she was seeing. The street outside her humble diner, usually quiet and unremarkable, was now filled with more expensive vehicles than she'd ever seen in her life. She rubbed her eyes, unsure if she was imagining things. The hum of the engines was deafening as they parked along the curb. Her heart began to race. A man in a tailored suit stepped out of one of the cars, his posture confident. Yet there was something about him that seemed familiar. It was the man from last night, the one she had helped. She froze. What was going on? The man, dressed impeccably, walked toward the diner with a calm, determined pace. As he got closer, Anna's mind raced. What was he doing here? She had barely spoken to him the night before. She had fed him the last of her soup, out of kindness, without any expectations. She had never imagined that the man would return, let alone with a whole convoy of luxury vehicles. He was holding something in his hand, a leather folder, but it wasn't the papers that caught her attention. It was the way he moved with purpose, the way his presence seemed to demand attention. He wasn't just some stranger anymore. He was someone important. As he stepped through the door, the bell above it chimed, and every head in the diner turned in surprise. The regulars were staring, wide-eyed. They had never seen anything like this in their quiet town. The man looked around, his eyes scanning the room until they settled on Anna, standing frozen behind the counter. "Miss Anna," he said, his voice smooth and confident. Anna blinked, unsure if she was hearing him right. "You remember me, don't you?" His smile was faint, but there was something genuine about it. Anna nodded slowly, trying to process what was happening. "I didn't expect to see you here," she said, her voice trembling slightly. "I had no idea," she continued, feeling embarrassed. "I didn't know who you were." The man's smile widened, though his eyes were serious. "You didn't need to know," he replied. "But I owe you more than you can imagine." Anna felt a wave of confusion wash over her. "Oh me?" she asked, her voice cracking slightly. "Yes," he said, stepping closer, his presence commanding the space. "You see, last night, you did something for me that no one else would have, and I've decided to show you my appreciation." He reached into his coat and pulled out a thick envelope. Anna hesitated, but he placed it gently on the counter in front of her. "This is for you," he said simply. Anna's eyes widened as she looked at the envelope. It wasn't like any tip she had ever received. It was substantial, far more than anything she had ever imagined. "I can't accept this," she said, pushing the envelope back toward him. But the man shook his head. "You can? And you will, he insisted. You've given me something that money can't buy. And now I'm going to help you. Anna's heart raced. What was going on? Why was he doing this? The man seemed to sense her hesitation. I understand that this may seem sudden, but I'm not the kind of person to forget a good deed. You gave me more than just a meal last night. You gave me hope. Anna didn't know what to say. She had been raised to never expect anything in return for kindness, and now this man was offering her something far beyond what she had ever dreamed. I'm not asking for anything in return, he continued, his tone softening. But I've made arrangements to help you, your diner, your future. Consider this a small gesture to get you started. Anna's mind was spinning. She couldn't understand why he was doing this, why he was so eager to help her. But as she looked into his eyes, she saw something genuine there. It wasn't about the money. It was about the kindness she had shown him when he had nothing left. She was still processing his words when another figure stepped through the door. This man, too, was dressed in a sharp suit, but there was something more familiar about him. It was the man's assistant, the one who had followed him into the diner the night before. The assistant nodded to her with a respectful smile, but it was clear that Anna's world was changing, whether she was ready for it or not. The man in the suit turned back to her, his eyes steady. I'm here to offer you more than just a tip, he said. I'm offering you a future, a chance to make something of this diner, and to make something of yourself. Anna's heart was pounding now, the weight of the moment settling on her. She was no longer just a waitress in a small diner. She was someone being given an opportunity, a chance to change her life forever. She looked down at the envelope, then back at the man who had come to repay her kindness. She didn't know what to say, but for the first time in a long while, she knew that her future might be brighter than she had ever imagined. I was still holding the envelope in my hands, its weight feeling like the promise of something new. My heart was racing, not with excitement, but with disbelief. How had my life come to this? Just yesterday, I was wondering how I was going to make it through the next month, how I was going to keep the diner afloat, and now, here I was, standing in front of a man who was offering me a future I could never have dreamed of. He hadn't asked for anything in return. He had just given. I had never met someone like him before, someone so willing to help, someone so genuine. But I was still skeptical. Why was he doing this? Why me? As I looked down at the envelope, a part of me wanted to refuse. It felt too good to be true. I had worked so hard, and now here was someone willing to change everything. I had to be careful. Nothing in life comes free. I needed to know more, needed to understand why. Why are you doing this? I asked, my voice shaking. The man smiled softly, as if he had been expecting the question. Because you showed me kindness when I had nothing, he said, his tone calm and unwavering. You didn't hesitate to help me, and in a world like this, that kind of kindness is rare. I believe it deserves to be rewarded. His words struck me harder than anything else he had said. Kindness. Was that all it took? But his next words made it clear that there was more to it. I believe that people who help others should be given opportunities to grow. You've been stuck in this small town, but you have the potential to do so much more. You deserve a chance to live a life free from worry, to create something greater than what you have now. I felt a lump form in my throat. What did he mean by that? Was he saying I had the potential to do something big? Something outside of this tiny diner, this life that had been my world for as long as I could remember? The thought was overwhelming. I don't know what to say, I whispered, my hands trembling. I don't know what I would do with all this opportunity. The man placed his hand on the counter, his gaze steady and unwavering. You don't have to decide everything now, he said. Just take the first step. Open your mind to the possibilities. I'll be here to support you, to guide you. This is just the beginning, Anna. His words hung in the air, and for the first time in a long while, I allowed myself to believe that maybe, just maybe, I was meant for something more than I had ever imagined. But there was something else in the back of my mind. The promise of success, the offer of wealth, came with a price. I had spent my whole life working hard, struggling, and yet here I was, about to take a step into a world that I had no real understanding of. Could I really do it? Could I step out of the shadows and into the light, or would I crumble under the pressure? My heart was still racing, but I knew I couldn't walk away from this. I had to at least try. I looked at the man again, this time with a glimmer of hope in my eyes. I'll do it, I said softly. I'll take the first step. He smiled, a genuine, warm smile that seemed to radiate from him. That's all I ask. Over the next few days, things began to move quickly. The man, Mr. Donovan, as I had learned his name to be, had a plan. He wasn't just offering money. He was offering me an entirely new life. He introduced me to a network of investors, of people who could help transform my diner into something far greater. He helped me expand my business, revamp the menu, and even gave me access to resources I had never dreamed of. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was part of something bigger. But with every step forward, the weight of the decision pressed heavier on me. I had to constantly remind myself that I wasn't dreaming, that this was real. The diner, once a small, run-down establishment, began to thrive. People from all over the area started coming in, attracted by the new menu and the buzz surrounding the place. I had never seen such success, and yet, I couldn't shake the feeling that it was all too much. Too fast. I wasn't ready. And then, one morning, the realization hit me. I wasn't just running a business now, I was running a brand. People knew my name. People knew my story. And with that, came the pressure. The pressure to keep going, to keep achieving, to keep living up to everyone's expectations. I had to constantly prove myself, constantly show that I was worthy of this new life, this new identity. But even as the stress mounted, I couldn't deny the thrill that came with it. The excitement of building something from the ground up. The feeling of not being invisible anymore. And yet, no matter how far I came, I always returned to one simple fact. None of this would have happened if I hadn't shared that one meal with a stranger. I still couldn't understand why Mr. Donovan had done what he did. But I knew one thing for sure. Kindness had a way of changing lives. It had changed mine in ways I couldn't have predicted. And now, as I stood in the diner, looking out at the bustling street, I realized that I wasn't just waiting for life to happen anymore. I was making it happen. The future was finally mine to shape. I had never imagined how quickly my life could change. Just a few weeks ago, I was a simple waitress, struggling to keep my family's diner afloat. Now here I was, overseeing a thriving business, my name known by people I never thought I would meet. The pressure was overwhelming, and yet, there was a fire within me that I had never felt before. I wanted more. I wanted to prove that I could make this work, not just for me, but for my mother and my brother. I had a new team behind me, but the weight of responsibility still felt like it was entirely on my shoulders. As I sat in my office, my laptop open in front of me, I reviewed the latest financial projections. The diner was doing well, but I could sense the subtle changes happening around me. People were beginning to take notice, and with that attention came the expectation to succeed on a level that was unfamiliar to me. I stared at the numbers, trying to make sense of them. The growth was incredible, but it wasn't just about numbers. It was about people, about making the right decisions, and about living up to the trust Mr. Donovan had placed in me. I could feel the pressure mounting. The decisions I made now would determine whether I could truly create something lasting or whether I would fall back into the same life I had known before. Just as I was about to dive deeper into the data, my phone rang. I glanced at the screen and saw Mr. Donovan's name. I hesitated for a moment, then answered. "Anna," he said, his voice as calm and assured as ever. "I need to speak with you about something important. Can you meet me this afternoon?" I agreed, trying to mask the unease in my voice. I wasn't sure what this meeting would entail, but I had learned by now that Mr. Donovan's words carried weight. His generosity had given me a new life, but it also came with responsibilities I wasn't entirely sure I was prepared for. That afternoon, I drove to the downtown area, where Mr. Donovan's office was located. The building was sleek and modern, a stark contrast to the humble diner I had grown up in. As I entered the lobby, I was greeted by his assistant, who led me up to his office on the top floor. The view was breathtaking, stretching out over the city's skyline. Mr. Donovan was already seated at his desk when I walked in. He stood up to greet me, offering a firm handshake. "Anna, I'm glad you could make it," he said. "Please sit down." I took a seat across from him, trying to keep my nerves in check. He didn't waste any time. "I've been following your progress closely," he began. "You've done well, but now it's time to take the next step. I want to introduce you to a new opportunity, an expansion project that could change everything for you." My heart skipped a beat. Expansion? Could I really handle that kind of responsibility? But I couldn't let the fear show on my face. "What kind of project are you talking about?" I asked, my voice steady, despite the whirlwind in my mind. Mr. Donovan leaned forward, his eyes locked on mine. I've been impressed by your work so far, Anna. You've built something special with your diner. But now, it's time to think bigger. We're talking about multiple locations, a brand that could go national. I've already secured the investors. What I need from you is the vision, the leadership. His words hung in the air like a challenge. I had always dreamed of something more, but the reality of running a large-scale business seemed so far beyond what I had known. Could I really step into a world like that? Could I lead a team, manage multiple locations, and build a brand that would resonate across the country? The idea was both exhilarating and terrifying. But as I sat there, looking at Mr. Donovan, I realized something. This wasn't just an opportunity for me. It was an opportunity for my family, for the people who had supported me along the way. It was a chance to make something that would last. And in that moment, I knew I couldn't turn it down. I'll do it, I said, my voice firm. Mr. Donovan smiled, a knowing look in his eyes. I knew you would, he said. You've got the drive. Now, it's time to take that drive and turn it into something bigger. I'll be here to support you every step of the way. As I left his office, the weight of the decision began to settle in. This was it, the moment that would define the rest of my life. I was about to step into a world I had only ever dreamed of. The road ahead wouldn't be easy, but for the first time in a long while, I felt ready. I had something to prove, not just to the world, but to myself. The next few months passed in a blur of meetings, planning, and endless preparation. I worked tirelessly, making sure that every detail was perfect. I traveled to different cities, meeting with contractors, designers, and potential staff members. It was exhausting, but the excitement kept me going. With Mr. Donovan's guidance and the support of my team, the vision for my new brand began to take shape. I was no longer just a waitress. I was a business owner, a leader, a force in my own right. The day the first new location opened was one of the most surreal moments of my life. I stood in the center of the bustling new diner, watching as customers came in, sat down, and enjoyed the food I had worked so hard to create. It was a success, far beyond anything I had imagined. And as I stood there, surrounded by my new team, I realized that this was only the beginning. The journey ahead would be long, but I was no longer afraid. I had come too far to turn back now. This was my time. I had earned it. I stood in the center of the new diner, watching the room fill with customers, the hum of conversation mixing with the clink of silverware. It was a new world, one I had only dreamed of, yet here I was, the owner of something bigger than I ever thought possible. The first location had opened successfully, and the response had been overwhelming. The team I had carefully chosen had worked tirelessly to get everything right. It wasn't just about food anymore. It was about building something that people would come to trust, something they could feel good about. The second location was already in the works, and I was working with my new team of designers, contractors, and managers to expand further. Mr. Donovan's words echoed in my mind. This is just the beginning. It was hard to believe. Less than 6 months ago, I was struggling just to keep the diner running, wondering if I could make it another year. Now, I had to keep up with the demand, keep innovating, and lead a growing company. But with each passing day, I felt more confident, more capable. There were moments when I felt like I was still the same Anna, the waitress who had served a stranger in the middle of a storm. But now, the weight of responsibility was different. I wasn't just working for myself anymore. I was working for my team, my customers, my family. My mother and my brother were still part of the journey, and now they were seeing a new version of me, one that didn't just wait for life to happen. I was making it happen. Yet, the road ahead wasn't without challenges. There were long nights, moments of doubt, and frustrations that felt like they would never end. One evening, I sat in my office, reviewing the numbers and trying to plan for the future, when I received a call from Mr. Donovan. His voice was calm, but there was something serious in it. Anna, we need to talk, he said. I immediately felt a tightness in my chest. I had come to rely on his guidance, and whenever he said we needed to talk, it wasn't just a casual chat. I agreed to meet him at his office later that afternoon. When I arrived, he was already there, seated behind his desk with a stack of papers in front of him. He motioned for me to sit down. There's something we need to address, he began. I've been watching the expansion closely, and while things are going well, we've hit a critical point. You've built something special, but now, you're facing the next level of growth, and with that comes risk. His words hit me like a punch to the gut. Risk? I had worked so hard to get to this point. The last thing I wanted was to fail. But I kept my composure, nodding as he continued. "You're ready for this," he said. "But the next step will require more capital, more involvement from outside investors, and a level of oversight that you may not be prepared for yet." I could feel my stomach tighten. Outside investors? I had worked so hard to create something of my own. Was I ready to let others in, to give up control? I opened my mouth to speak, but Mr. Donovan raised a hand to stop me. "I know this is difficult, but remember, growth doesn't happen without risk. You have the vision, Anna. Now, it's about expanding that vision, making the brand bigger, stronger. You won't be alone in this, but you have to be willing to make the tough calls." I sat back in my chair, processing his words. Everything I had worked for had brought me to this point, and I couldn't let fear hold me back. I had a responsibility to everyone who believed in me. I had to take the next step, even if it meant embracing the uncertainty. "What do I need to do?" I asked, my voice steady. "First, we need to find the right investors," Mr. Donovan said. "People who believe in what you're building, not just in the numbers, but in the heart of the brand. You've done the hard part. Now it's time to scale." We spent the next hour discussing the logistics, the financials, and the investors who could help take my diner to new heights. It was overwhelming, but I also felt a sense of purpose. This wasn't just about the money. It was about something bigger than me. The diner had become a symbol of resilience, of growth, and of the power of kindness. That night, as I walked back to the diner, I took a moment to reflect. I was no longer just a waitress. I was a business owner, a leader, and someone who had the power to change her own fate. The journey was far from over, but I knew that as long as I stayed true to my vision and kept working hard, I could turn this dream into something lasting. And no matter how much success I found, I would always remember the man who changed everything for me, a man I had fed in a storm when he had nothing, and who had repaid me in ways I could never have imagined. I had made the decision. I was ready. The days that followed were a whirlwind of meetings, phone calls, and decisions that seemed to come at me from every direction. But despite the chaos, there was a feeling of certainty deep within me. I had worked so hard to get here, and now, it was time to build something even bigger. The investors that Mr. Donovan had promised had been brought in, each one more powerful than the last, each more eager to back the brand that had started as a small diner in a small town. There was pressure, yes, but there was also an undeniable excitement that surged through me. For the first time in my life, I felt like I was on the verge of something truly monumental. I was meeting with a few of the investors in a high-rise building downtown, and the room was filled with people who were all eager to hear about the vision I had for the future. It was surreal. I was no longer the waitress who had served a freezing stranger and helped him with a meal. I was now the owner of a brand with a future that could stretch far beyond anything I had ever imagined. As I presented my plans, explaining how we would expand the brand and make it a household name, I could feel the weight of their expectations. But I wasn't nervous. I was confident. I had earned my place here, and I was going to make sure everyone knew it. The investors were impressed, and they agreed to the plans almost immediately. There was no going back now. This was happening. As the meeting ended and the investors began to leave, Mr. Donovan remained behind, his presence as steady and calm as always. "You did well," he said, giving me a nod of approval. "This is just the beginning, Anna. You have what it takes." I smiled, feeling a mix of pride and relief. "Thank you," I said. "I couldn't have done it without you." He gave me a look, the kind that said he believed in me more than I believed in myself. "You had it in you all along. I just helped you see it." As I left the building and stepped into the crisp evening air, I couldn't help but feel a sense of disbelief. This was my life now. The opportunities, the pressure, the responsibilities, they were all mine. I knew that the road ahead wouldn't always be smooth, but I was ready. I had built something from the ground up, and now it was time to take it to the next level. As I got into my car, I thought back to the night when I had served that stranger, to the way he had looked at me with gratitude and disbelief. That moment had changed everything. It had set me on a path that had led me here, to a life I had never imagined. And now, I was ready to see where this journey would take me. The first step was the grand opening of the new restaurant. The second location was finally ready, and it was more than I had ever dreamed. The space was modern, sleek, and welcoming, with every detail carefully thought out. As I walked through the restaurant before the doors opened, I felt a sense of pride swell within me. This was my vision, my hard work, my dream. And now, it was becoming a reality. The doors opened, and the crowd began to pour in. The energy in the room was electric, filled with excitement and anticipation. I watched as my team worked seamlessly together, making sure every guest was taken care of, every dish prepared to perfection. For the first time in a long time, I felt a deep sense of fulfillment. This was what I had worked for. This was what I had earned. As the evening went on, I couldn't help but notice the way people responded to the restaurant. It wasn't just about the food or the atmosphere. It was about the experience. People felt like they were part of something special, something bigger than just a meal. It was the kind of connection I had always wanted to create. As the night drew to a close, I stood by the door, watching as guests left with smiles on their faces, already talking about their next visit. I felt a sense of accomplishment that was hard to put into words. But then, as I turned to head back to my office, I saw him. The man who had started it all. Mr. Donovan stood by the bar, a drink in hand, watching the scene unfold. He gave me a small, approving nod as I approached him. "You did it," he said, his voice warm with pride. "This is only the beginning." I smiled, feeling a wave of gratitude wash over me. "Thank you," I said again, knowing that I would never have gotten here without him. He shook his head. "You did all the work. I just gave you the opportunity." As I stood there, surrounded by the success of the evening, I realized that this was only the first step in a much larger journey. There were still so many obstacles to overcome, so many challenges ahead. But I was no longer afraid. I had come too far to turn back. And with Mr. Donovan's support and my own determination, I knew there was nothing I couldn't accomplish. The future was mine to shape. I stood in the middle of the newly opened restaurant, my heart pounding with pride. The place was buzzing, filled with customers enjoying their meals, the sounds of conversation mixing with the clinking of glasses. It had taken months of hard work, sleepless nights, and countless hours of planning and execution, but it was finally here. The second location of my restaurant was thriving, and it felt like the world was opening up in front of me. The sense of accomplishment was overwhelming, but there was still so much more to do. The pressure was mounting, and I knew the stakes were higher than ever. As I walked through the dining room, greeting familiar faces and making sure everything was running smoothly, my phone buzzed in my pocket. I pulled it out and saw a message from Mr. Donovan. "Meet me in my office tomorrow morning. There's something we need to discuss." My stomach dropped. Every time he asked to meet, it was for something serious, something that could change everything. I took a deep breath, put my phone away, and continued making my rounds. The night went by in a blur. The staff were all working hard, and the customers seemed to be enjoying the food and the atmosphere. But in the back of my mind, all I could think about was Mr. Donovan's message. What did he want to discuss? The next morning, I drove to his office, my thoughts racing. When I arrived, his assistant led me to the same conference room where we had discussed the future of my restaurant months ago. Mr. Donovan was already there, his usual calm demeanor giving nothing away. "Anna, come in," he said as he motioned for me to sit. I took my seat, trying to steady my nerves. "I've been following your progress closely," he began, his voice steady. "The second location is doing well, and I'm impressed with how quickly you've managed to expand. But now, we're at a crossroads." My heart skipped a beat. "Hey, crossroads? That didn't sound good. What do you mean?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. He leaned forward slightly, his eyes locked on mine. "You've reached a point where growth is no longer about just 1 or 2 locations. You have the potential to build a national brand, Anna. But to do that, you'll need more than just investors. You'll need a solid strategy, a strong team, and someone who can guide you through the complexities of scaling." I felt a wave of both excitement and fear wash over me. This was what I had wanted. Expansion, growth, the opportunity to take my brand to new heights. But the weight of it all was starting to feel heavy. "I don't know if I'm ready for that," I admitted, my voice shaking slightly. "It's a big leap, and I'm not sure I can handle it." Mr. Donovan's gaze softened. "You're ready, Anna. You've shown time and time again that you have the drive, the vision, and the heart. But now, you need to take the next step. I'm here to help guide you, but you'll need to trust yourself." His words hit me hard. Trust myself. I had been so focused on proving myself to others that I hadn't stopped to trust my own abilities. I had come so far, and yet here I was, doubting myself. "I want to build something bigger," I said, my voice more confident now. I want to create a brand that people love and trust, something that lasts. Mr. Donovan smiled, nodding. That's the spirit. And I'm going to make sure you have everything you need to succeed. Over the next few weeks, I threw myself into the project. We brought in a team of experts to help with the branding, the marketing, and the logistics of scaling. It was overwhelming, but it was also thrilling. I knew that this was the chance of a lifetime, and I wasn't going to let it slip away. The next few months were a blur of meetings, conference calls, and strategy sessions. The restaurant industry was competitive, and I quickly learned that the bigger you got, the more challenges you faced. But with each hurdle, I felt myself growing stronger. I was learning to trust my instincts, to make decisions that would shape the future of my brand. Finally, after months of hard work, we were ready for the launch of the new locations. I stood in front of the doors of the new restaurant, watching the staff prepare for the grand opening. This was the moment I had been working for, the moment that would define the rest of my career. My heart raced as I thought about all the work that had gone into this, all the sacrifices, all the late nights. But as I watched the doors open and customers began to flood in, I realized something. This wasn't just about business anymore. It was about creating something that could impact people's lives, something that would bring joy to everyone who walked through the door. The success of the launch exceeded all expectations. The restaurant was packed, the reviews were glowing, and the buzz was spreading fast. It was clear that we had created something special, something that people loved. As I stood at the front of the restaurant, looking out at the bustling crowd, I felt a deep sense of pride. This was my dream come true. But more than that, it was a testament to the power of kindness, to the power of taking a chance on someone when they least expect it. I had been that waitress, struggling to make ends meet, unsure of where my life would take me. And now, here I was, the owner of a thriving restaurant brand with a future that was brighter than I had ever imagined. The journey wasn't over, and I knew there would be more challenges ahead. But I was no longer afraid. I had proven to myself that I could do this, and with each new success, I felt more empowered to keep going. The future was mine to shape, and I was ready to take on whatever came next. I stood at the edge of the restaurant, watching the steady flow of customers coming through the door. The grand opening had been a resounding success, but now the real work began. This was no longer just about keeping a small diner running. It was about sustaining this success, growing it, and making sure that the brand we had worked so hard to create stood the test of time. The weight of that responsibility settled heavily on my shoulders. I had built something incredible, but I couldn't afford to be complacent. The pressure was unlike anything I had ever experienced, but it was also the fuel that kept me going. I had made promises to myself, to the people who believed in me, and most of all, to Mr. Donovan, who had put his faith in me from the very beginning. It was clear that he had a vision for me, for what I could become, and I didn't want to let that slip away. The next few months were a blur. Every day was filled with meetings, strategies, and constant decision-making. I spent hours working with my team, ensuring that every detail was perfect, from the food to the customer experience. But no matter how much I poured into the business, I couldn't shake the feeling that there was something I was missing. I knew I needed to step up even further. One afternoon, as I was going over some paperwork in my office, I received a call from Mr. Donovan. I had grown accustomed to his calm, measured voice, but today, there was a different tone in his words. "Anna," he said, his voice serious, "I need to speak with you. Something has come up, and it's important." My heart skipped a beat. We hadn't had a serious discussion like this in months, and I couldn't help but feel that something big was on the horizon. I agreed to meet him the next day, and as I hung up, my mind began racing. What was this about? Was it another opportunity, or was it something that would challenge everything I had worked so hard for? The next morning, I arrived at his office, my nerves on edge. Mr. Donovan was already there, seated behind his desk, looking as composed as ever. "Anna, come in," he said, motioning for me to sit. As I took my seat, I noticed the paperwork in front of him, business plans, contracts, and what looked like legal documents. This was serious. "What's going on?" I asked, my voice steady but full of concern. Mr. Donovan leaned forward, folding his hands together. "I've been monitoring your progress," he began. "You've done well, but now we're facing a new challenge. Your expansion has caught the attention of some major players in the industry. There are people who want to invest in your brand, but there are also competitors who see you as a threat." I felt a chill run down my spine. "A threat? What do you mean?" I asked. I thought we were doing well. You are, he said, nodding. But when you rise to a certain level, there are always those who will try to undermine you. You need to be prepared for the next phase of this journey. You've got to protect what you've built. The reality of what he was saying hit me hard. This wasn't just about creating a successful business anymore. It was about surviving the cutthroat world of business, where rivals were waiting for any weakness to exploit. I had always dreamed of success, but I hadn't anticipated the fierce competition that would come with it. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice resolute. Mr. Donovan looked at me for a long moment, his gaze unwavering. First, you need to make sure your brand is protected. We need to secure intellectual property rights, and we need to ensure that no one can copy what you've created. He paused, letting the weight of his words sink in. Second, you need to build a stronger team around you. You can't do this alone, Anna. You need people who can help you navigate the challenges ahead. I'm here to guide you, but you need a strong support system. I nodded, my mind racing with all the things I needed to do. Protecting the brand, strengthening the team, these were not small tasks. But I had come too far to let fear stop me now. I'm ready, I said, determination in my voice. Mr. Donovan smiled slightly, a glint of approval in his eyes. Good. I'll help you with the first part. As for the second, I've already made some calls. You'll meet with a few key people who can help you build the right team. As the meeting ended, I felt both overwhelmed and empowered. The road ahead wasn't going to be easy, but I wasn't backing down. I had built this business from the ground up, and I wasn't going to let anyone take it away from me. Over the next few weeks, I worked tirelessly to implement Mr. Donovan's advice. I met with lawyers to protect our intellectual property and started hiring people who shared my vision. We built a team of talented individuals who could help take the brand to the next level. It was exhausting, but I felt a sense of purpose in everything I did. Each step I took was one closer to securing my future and the future of the business I had worked so hard to create. As the weeks turned into months, I saw the fruits of our labor. The business was thriving, and we were becoming a force to be reckoned with in the industry. But with that success came the realization that this was only the beginning. The challenges would never stop coming. But as long as I had the right team, the right vision, and the right mindset, I knew I could overcome anything that came my way. I had finally reached a point where everything seemed to be falling into place. The brand was thriving, the team was solid, and the recognition was starting to pour in. Yet, in the quiet moments when I was alone, doubts still crept in. I had built this empire from the ground up, but what if I couldn't sustain it? What if the pressure was too much? The stakes were higher than ever, and I had to make decisions that would determine the future of the business. I had a meeting with Mr. Donovan scheduled the next morning. His steady presence had always been a source of guidance for me, but today, there was an edge to his tone that made me uneasy. When I walked into his office, he motioned for me to sit down, his expression serious. Anna, I need to talk to you about the next phase of your business, he said, his voice calm but firm. You've done an incredible job so far, but you're at a turning point. Things are going to get much more complicated from here. I took a deep breath, bracing myself. I knew this conversation was coming. I had been running on adrenaline, pushing myself harder than ever, but now, the reality of what came next was sinking in. What do you mean? I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. We're expanding quickly, and that means more investors, more partnerships, and more attention, he explained. With that attention comes scrutiny, and not everyone will have your best interests at heart. I swallowed hard, the weight of his words hitting me. I had come so far, but now, there were people who would be watching for any weakness, ready to pounce. What do I need to do? I asked, my voice firmer now, determined to face whatever was ahead. You need to build a stronger support system, he said. You can't do this alone. The business is growing, but you need to protect it. You need to have people you can trust to help guide you through these challenges. The weight of the responsibility was starting to feel heavier, but I knew he was right. I couldn't manage everything myself. As much as I wanted to keep control, I had to rely on the expertise of others. What about the investors? I asked. We've made some deals already, but I know there are other opportunities coming up. Mr. Donovan nodded. You'll need to be selective. Not all investors are the right fit for your vision. You need people who believe in what you're doing, who understand the long-term goals, not just the short-term profits. I took a moment to process his words. This was the hardest part, choosing who to trust, who to let in. I had learned the hard way that not everyone had my best interests at heart. What should I do next? I asked, the uncertainty creeping back in. Start building your leadership team, he said, his tone confident. You need to surround yourself with people who are just as committed to the long-term success as you are. And make sure you're protecting your brand. Keep your vision clear, and don't let anyone distract you from what you've set out to accomplish. I left his office that day with a new sense of determination. The road ahead would be challenging, but I was ready. I had come too far to let fear dictate my future. I spent the next few weeks carefully selecting the right partners, meeting with potential investors who shared my vision for the brand. I knew this was a crucial moment in the business, and I had to make sure that every decision I made would strengthen the foundation I had worked so hard to build. Along the way, there were setbacks. Not every partnership worked out the way I had hoped. Some investors wanted to take the business in a direction that didn't align with my vision, and it was hard to let go of opportunities that seemed promising on the surface. But I remembered Mr. Donovan's advice: don't compromise on the vision. It wasn't easy, but I knew it was the right decision. Then, one afternoon as I was reviewing some final contracts for a new location, I got a call from an unfamiliar number. It was a voice I hadn't heard in a while, an old colleague from my previous job in the city. Anna, the voice on the other end said, I've been following your success. I think it's time we talked. I didn't recognize the name at first, but as the conversation went on, I realized this person had been part of a network I had once been connected to. The offer was tempting, another potential investor with deep pockets and connections. But there was something about the tone of the conversation that set off alarm bells in my head. I knew I couldn't make a rash decision. Mr. Donovan had always told me to trust my instincts, and my instincts told me to be cautious. I politely declined the offer, stating that I was focusing on my current plans and couldn't entertain new investors at the moment. It was a small victory, but it was a reminder that I had come a long way. I was no longer the person who would blindly follow any offer. I was in control of my future, and I was making decisions that aligned with my values. Over the next few months, the business continued to grow, but it was no longer just about the expansion. It was about building a legacy. I focused on strengthening the brand, making sure that every decision was in line with the values that had gotten me to this point. Hard work, integrity, and a commitment to providing quality and kindness in everything we did. The challenges didn't stop, but I was no longer afraid. I had faced my fears and doubts, and now I was stronger than ever. The journey was far from over, but I knew that with each decision, I was building something that would last. I had built something I was proud of, something that was no longer just a small dream, but a reality that people were beginning to take notice of. But as with any success, new challenges arose. The pressure to maintain growth was mounting. Every day brought a new task, a new decision that would shape the future of my brand. I had to make sure we didn't just survive, we needed to thrive. The competition was fierce, and it wasn't just about the food anymore. It was about staying relevant, staying connected to our customers, and making sure the brand was synonymous with quality, care, and consistency. One afternoon, as I was reviewing the latest sales reports, my phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Donovan. It was short, direct. We need to talk. It's urgent. My heart skipped a beat. It wasn't the first time I had received a message like this from him, but every time, the weight of it left me uneasy. I put down my phone and made my way to his office, the air heavy with the uncertainty of what was to come. When I arrived, he was already there, sitting behind his desk, papers scattered in front of him. His expression was focused, but his eyes held a seriousness that immediately put me on alert. Anna, he said, motioning for me to sit. You've done an exceptional job so far, but we've hit a critical point in the business. There's something you need to understand about the next phase. His words were measured, each one deliberate. We're on the verge of entering new markets, expanding even further, but there's a big risk we have to address. The larger we get, the more we stand to lose if we're not careful. My stomach turned. I had always known that expansion came with its own set of risks, but hearing him say it out loud made it all feel too real. What kind of risk? I asked, my voice steady despite the fear creeping in. The market is changing, he explained. New competitors are emerging, and there are some who see your success as a threat. They'll stop at nothing to take you down. You need to be prepared for this, Anna. You need to make sure your brand is protected and that your leadership team is strong enough to handle what's coming. I took a deep breath, trying to process everything he was saying. My success had attracted attention, but not all of it was positive. I had worked so hard to build this, and now, I had to protect it from forces I couldn't even control. What do you suggest? I asked, feeling the weight of the conversation pressing down on me. Mr. Donovan leaned back in his chair, his gaze unwavering. We need to solidify your position in the market. We need to make sure your brand is so ingrained in the minds of your customers that nothing can shake it. And we need to bring in the right partners, people who can help us weather the storm ahead. We can't do this alone anymore. The idea of partnering with others had always been daunting to me. I had built this business from scratch, and I wasn't sure how I felt about relying on others. But the more Mr. Donovan spoke, the more I realized he was right. I couldn't do this on my own. I needed to grow, and with growth came new challenges. So what's the next step? I asked, ready to face whatever came next. We'll start by building a stronger brand identity, he said. You need to be seen as a leader in your industry, not just a restaurant owner. People need to recognize you for your values, your commitment to quality, and your innovative approach. We'll also expand your online presence and make sure your story is heard. The idea of expanding my personal brand was daunting, but I understood the importance of it. I had always been more focused on the day-to-day operations, but now, I had to think bigger. What about the team? I asked, already knowing the answer. We need to bring in more experienced leaders, he said. People who have been through the challenges of scaling a business. You need to surround yourself with experts who can guide you through this next phase. You've already proven you can handle a lot, but you need the right people to help you succeed. The conversation shifted to the details, hiring the right people, strengthening the team, and finding the right investors to help support the brand's growth. The next few weeks were a blur. I met with potential partners, investors, and advisors who could help me navigate this next phase. It was overwhelming, but I knew it was necessary. The more I met with these new people, the more I realized how much I still had to learn. But I was determined. I wasn't going to let the fear of failure stop me now. As the weeks passed, I began to see the pieces fall into place. The new team was coming together, and we were starting to make moves that would position us for success in the coming years. I had never felt so alive, so focused. But even with all the excitement, there were moments when I doubted myself. The weight of leadership, the constant pressure to perform, was starting to take its toll. One evening, after a long day of meetings, I found myself sitting alone in my office, staring at the city skyline. The lights from the buildings below twinkled like stars, and for a moment, I felt small, insignificant. The road ahead seemed long, and the challenges felt impossible. But then I remembered something Mr. Donovan had said. You have what it takes. And in that moment, I realized he was right. I had already overcome so much. This was just another hurdle, one that I was ready to face head-on. I took a deep breath, stood up, and walked out of my office. The future was waiting, and I was determined to meet it. I had come so far, yet the path ahead felt steeper than ever. The decisions I had made in the past few months had set me on a new trajectory, but now, everything was starting to feel like a balancing act. The restaurant was growing, the brand was expanding, and the challenges were mounting, but I was no longer the woman I was when I started this journey. I had grown stronger, more confident, and more aware of the responsibility I carried, not just for my business, but for my team, my customers, and the dream I had built. As I stood in the office, looking at the plans for the next phase of expansion, I realized that there was no turning back now. I had built something that was bigger than me, and the future of my brand depended on the decisions I made today. The pressure was immense, but I was determined not to let it break me. It was a bright morning when I met with my team to discuss the next steps. We had just opened 2 new locations, and the feedback had been overwhelmingly positive. Still, we knew that with growth came complexity. Our systems, our processes, and even our culture needed to evolve. I had learned that leadership wasn't just about vision. It was about execution. And that meant bringing in the right people to help carry the weight. We need to think beyond just opening new locations, I said, looking around the room at the team I had handpicked. It's about building a network that can support our growth, sustain our values, and bring us to places we haven't even imagined yet. There was a quiet hum in the room as everyone took in what I was saying. I could see the determination in their eyes, the belief that we were all in this together. It was clear we had built something special, but to make it last, We needed to be prepared for the challenges that lay ahead. Over the next few weeks, we focused on strengthening our infrastructure. We brought in experienced managers, revamped our marketing strategies, and streamlined our operations to make sure we were ready for the next phase. But even with all the progress we were making, the doubts still lingered. I began to wonder if I had enough to keep pushing forward. What if the weight of the expectations was too much? What if, despite all the hard work, we still couldn't make it? It was one of those sleepless nights that kept me up, staring at the ceiling, when my phone buzzed. I picked it up to see a message from Mr. Donovan. "Meet me tomorrow morning. We need to discuss the future." I was used to his cryptic messages, but this one felt different. Something told me it was important. The next morning, I found myself sitting in his office again, the same sense of anticipation I had felt when I first walked into this world of business. Mr. Donovan was already seated, a cup of coffee in his hand, as he looked up at me. "Anna," he began, "you've done an incredible job. The brand is growing, and your leadership is strong. But we're at a critical juncture now. The competition is increasing, and you need to be prepared for what's coming." His words were measured, but they carried weight. "What do you mean?" I asked, my voice steady but anxious. "I mean that the next step is about more than just growing the business," he said. "It's about protecting your vision, ensuring that it remains yours. You need to secure your position in the market. There are people out there who are willing to do anything to take what you've built." His words felt like a punch to the gut. I had built this from nothing, and now I had to protect it. "What do you suggest?" I asked, bracing myself for what came next. Mr. Donovan leaned forward, his gaze unwavering. "You need to diversify," he said. "You can't rely on just one part of the business. You need to expand your reach. You need to secure your intellectual property, strengthen your brand, and make sure you have the right allies to back you." I nodded, absorbing the weight of his words. This was bigger than just running a few successful restaurants. It was about safeguarding the future, about making sure the dream I had worked so hard to create didn't slip away. "I'll do it," I said, my voice firm. "I'll do whatever it takes to protect this." Mr. Donovan smiled, a rare show of approval. "I knew you would," he said. "But remember, this isn't about being the biggest. It's about being the best. If you stay true to your values, you'll outlast the competition." As I left his office that day, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The challenges ahead were bigger than I had ever faced, but I was no longer the same person who had walked into Mr. Donovan's office all those months ago. I had built a business that people respected, and now it was time to build a legacy. The road ahead was uncertain, but I was ready. With each decision, I was shaping the future. And I wasn't afraid anymore. I had never imagined that reaching the level of success I had worked so hard for would bring so many new obstacles. The pressure to maintain growth, expand into new markets, and keep my brand strong was constant. Each day felt like a balancing act between managing the business and protecting the dream I had built. But I wasn't backing down. I had come too far to let fear or uncertainty take hold now. I was meeting with my leadership team more frequently, checking in on every aspect of the business: marketing, operations, staffing. I needed to ensure that every detail was perfect, that every department was aligned with the brand's values and vision. I could feel the weight of responsibility growing, but at the same time, there was an unshakable confidence inside me. I had learned so much in such a short amount of time, and every challenge was an opportunity to grow. One afternoon, as I walked into the office, my phone buzzed with a message from Mr. Donovan. He wanted to meet. It had been a few weeks since our last discussion, and I couldn't help but wonder what he had in mind this time. We had discussed scaling, diversifying, and securing the brand, but with every step forward, there was always a new challenge waiting around the corner. When I arrived at his office, Mr. Donovan was sitting at his desk, looking as composed as always. "Anna, come in," he said, gesturing for me to sit. I could tell by the look on his face that this meeting would be different. He didn't waste any time. "The expansion is going well, but there's a new opportunity on the horizon," he said, his voice steady. "I've been approached by a major investor, someone who could help you take this brand global. But it comes with a cost." I sat up straighter, my mind racing. A global expansion? This was the next step I had been hoping for, but it felt overwhelming. "What do you mean, a cost?" I asked, trying to keep my voice steady. "This investor wants to have a say in how the brand evolves," he said. "They want control, Anna. They want to steer the ship." You have to decide if you're willing to give up some of the ownership to scale globally, or if you want to keep things smaller, but more independent. My heart pounded in my chest. This was the kind of decision that could change everything. The chance to go global was a dream, but it was also a huge risk. Was I ready to give up some control for the chance to grow beyond what I had ever imagined? What's the best course of action? I asked, looking to Mr. Donovan for guidance. He leaned back in his chair, his eyes thoughtful. It depends on your vision, Anna. If you want to maintain the integrity of your brand, you might have to pass on this offer. But if you're ready to scale, to become a global presence, then it might be the right move. It's a question of what you value most. I felt the weight of his words settle in. What did I value more? Keeping control of the brand, or seeing it grow beyond anything I had ever imagined? For the first time, I realized how much the brand had become a part of me. It wasn't just about the money or the success. It was about the legacy I wanted to create. I wanted the brand to be known for its quality, for its values, for the way it treated people. But could I do that on a global scale without compromising what I believed in? I need some time to think about this, I said, standing up. Mr. Donovan nodded. Take all the time you need. But remember, the world is changing quickly, and you have to decide where you want to go next. As I left his office, I couldn't shake the feeling that this decision would define the future of my business. I sat in my car, my mind racing. The thought of going global was exciting, but it also scared me. Could I handle it? Could I lead this brand through that kind of growth without losing what made it special? I knew one thing for sure. I couldn't make this decision alone. I needed to talk to my team, get their thoughts, and understand the risks and rewards better. The next day, I called an emergency meeting with my leadership team. I laid out everything that Mr. Donovan had told me, and we began to discuss the possibilities. Each person had their own opinion, but we all agreed on one thing. We couldn't make this decision lightly. As the discussion went on, I realized that my team was just as passionate about protecting the brand's integrity as I was. They understood the risks, but they also saw the potential for growth. We all agreed that if we were going to move forward with this investor, we needed to set clear boundaries. We couldn't sacrifice the values that had gotten us this far. We had to find a way to grow without losing who we were. The conversation gave me a sense of clarity. I didn't have all the answers yet, but I knew what I needed to do. I called Mr. Donovan later that afternoon. I've made my decision, I said, my voice steady. If we're going to take this step, we need to make sure we do it on our terms. I'm not willing to give up control of the brand, but I'm ready to expand, if we can find the right way to do it. Mr. Donovan's voice was calm, but full of approval. I thought you might say that, he said. You've built something strong, Anna. Now we need to make sure it grows the right way. I hung up the phone, feeling a sense of relief. The road ahead was still uncertain, but I knew that with the right team, the right vision, and a commitment to staying true to our values, we could conquer anything that came our way. I had made my decision. The path ahead was still filled with unknowns, but I wasn't afraid anymore. I had spent so long chasing success, wondering if I was good enough, if I could make something of myself. Now, I knew the truth. I had already made it. But the journey was far from over. The last few months had been a whirlwind of growth, challenges, and learning. We had expanded, we had faced tough decisions, but we had also stayed true to the values that had made us who we were in the first place. And now, as I stood in front of the new location, ready to open its doors to the public, I realized just how far I had come. The room was buzzing with activity, my team running around making final adjustments, ensuring everything was perfect. It was the opening of the third location, and it was going to be bigger than ever. I looked around the room, feeling the weight of it all. This wasn't just about food anymore. It was about a legacy, about something that could stand the test of time. The pressure was immense, but so was the pride I felt in what we had built. I had done it. We had done it. Everything ready? I asked my manager, who was standing by the door, clipboard in hand. She gave me a thumbs up, her face bright with excitement. All set, Anna. We're good to go. I smiled and nodded, taking a deep breath. This was it. The doors opened, and the first wave of customers poured in, filling the restaurant with energy. I stood behind the counter, watching it all unfold, my heart swelling with pride. It wasn't perfect yet. There were still areas to improve, things to fine-tune. But in that moment, as I saw the joy on the faces of our customers, I realized that this was what I had worked for. Not the money, not the recognition, but the impact we were having on people's lives. As the night went on, I watched my team work with precision, ensuring that each customer had a great experience. It felt like a well-oiled machine, and I couldn't have been prouder of them. They had all come together to make this happen, and it wasn't just about the business. It was about the family we had built here, a family that supported each other and shared the same vision. At the end of the night, as I stood in the now quiet restaurant, I realized something. It wasn't the numbers or the size of the brand that mattered most. It was the people, the team, the customers, and the community that had supported me every step of the way. They had all helped me build this, and now, we were all reaping the rewards. Mr. Donovan's words echoed in my mind. The world is changing quickly, and you have to decide where you want to go next. The future was uncertain, but that was the beauty of it. I had a strong foundation, a team that believed in the vision, and a brand that people trusted. Now, it was time to take the next step. I didn't know what the future held, but I knew that whatever came next, I was ready for it. I had come so far from the woman who had once struggled to make ends meet, wondering if she would ever escape the cycle. Now, I was the woman who had built something lasting, something that was bigger than I had ever dreamed. The road ahead wasn't easy, but I was no longer afraid. With each step, I was shaping the future. The journey was far from over, but I was no longer just chasing success. I had found it, and I knew that with hard work, determination, and the right people by my side, I could continue to build something that would last for generations to come.